Every single spring, millions of well-meaning people walk into a garden center and fall into the exact same financial trap. They spend $50 on seed packets, or worse, they spend $100 on pre-grown vegetable seedlings because they are terrified their seeds won't sprout. They plant them in expensive store-bought soil, they baby them for months, they harvest the food, the plants die in the winter frost, and the very next year, they go right back to the store and hand over their money all over again. If this is how you operate, you are trapped inside a closed consumer loop. You are literally renting your food supply. But what if you never had to buy a tomato, pepper, or expensive fruit tree plant ever again? What if you could buy just one single plant and safely, mechanically clone it 50 times, creating an infinite food engine from a single purchase? If you ask the gardening industry how to clone a plant, they will point you to a plastic shelf. They will tell you that you need to buy their proprietary laboratory-made rooting gels, powders and liquids that cost up to $30 for a tiny bottle. They will tell you that without their expensive chemicals, your cuttings will rot and die. That is a highly profitable lie. Today, we are tearing down that paywall. I am going to show you the 5-minute plant steroid. I'm going to show you how to walk into your kitchen pantry right now, take a handful of ordinary dried lentils, and mechanically extract the exact same master growth hormone they sell in those expensive plastic bottles. We're going to build a high-speed multiplication engine. This is not a hobby gardening trick. This is survival efficiency. By the end of this masterclass, you will know exactly how to clone your most expensive crops for absolutely $0, bypassing the fragile seedling stage entirely and guaranteeing a 100% survival rate. Welcome back to the channel. Let's multiply your food supply. To understand how to clone a plant for free, you cannot just blindly follow instructions. You have to understand the brutal mechanics of plant survival. When you take a pair of shears and cut a branch off a healthy, growing tomato or pepper plant, you are not just taking a cutting. You are intentionally creating a massive biological crisis. Think about the mechanics of that severed stem. It has leaves at the top that are actively sweating and losing moisture to the sun. But because you just severed it from the ground, it no longer has a root system to drink water. The clock is ticking. It is bleeding. It is entirely vulnerable. That severed stem has an extremely short window of time to physically transform its internal stem cells into root cells, or it will dehydrate and die. To make that drastic physical transformation, the plant needs a massive, immediate surge of a specific chemical signal. That signal is a master growth hormone called auxin. Auxin is the biological trigger that screams to the plant cells, "Stop growing leaves, build roots right now or we die." Here is where the failure happens for most beginners. If you just stick a cutting into a glass of tap water or a pot of dirt, that cutting has to rely entirely on its own internal reserves of auxin to trigger root growth. If the plant is weak or if the cutting is too small, it cannot produce enough of that hormone. The biological engine stalls, the stem rots, the leaves shrivel, and the clone fails. The agricultural industry knows this exact failure point. They synthesize artificial auxin in a laboratory, mix it with a preservative, put it in a tiny branded bottle, and charge you a fortune for it. But they are hiding a massive vulnerability in their own business model. Nature produces auxin for free. It produces it in massive, concentrated, hyperpotent doses inside the cheapest, most readily available food on the planet. Enter the humble dried lentil. You probably have a bag of them sitting in a dark jar next to your rice right now. To the average consumer, a lentil is just cheap soup. But biologically speaking, a dry lentil is a dormant, high-explosive survival engine. It is a living, breathing organism trapped inside a hardened, dry shell, waiting for one single mechanical trigger: water. When you introduce moisture to a dry lentil, a biological alarm bell rings inside the seed. The organism realizes it is time to wake up and establish itself. But the lentil faces a massive problem. It only has a tiny, finite amount of stored carbohydrate energy inside that shell. It must push out a root and anchor itself into the soil immediately, or it will starve to death before it can grow its first leaf. So what does the lentil do? It panics. It floods its own internal vascular system with a massive emergency dose of auxin. In the first 48 hours of waking up, the lentil produces a staggering, highly concentrated surge of rooting hormones, the exact same master growth hormones you pay $30 for at the hardware store. Our goal here is not to eat the lentil. Our goal is to hijack that chemical surge. The 5-minute extraction protocol. Take 1 cup of whole dried lentils. Do not use split lentils. Place them in a clean glass bowl and cover them with 4 cups of unchlorinated water. Let them soak completely submerged in the dark for exactly 12 hours. After 12 hours, drain the water, but catch it in a jar and put it in the refrigerator. That water is already packed with soluble nutrients. Leave the damp, swollen lentils in the bowl. Cover them with a dark, damp cloth and place the bowl in a warm cabinet. Check the bowl every 12 hours. Right around the 48-hour mark, you will see it. A tiny, bright white tail will burst out of the seed casing. Stop everything. Do not let them grow any further. This exact moment is when the auxin hormone is at its absolute maximum peak concentration. Dump the sprouted lentils directly into your kitchen blender. Take that reserved soaking water out of the fridge and pour it back in. Turn the blender on its highest possible speed and completely obliterate the seeds. You are physically shattering the cellular walls of the plant tissue, forcing the trapped auxin to release directly into the liquid. Strain the mixture through a cheesecloth. You are now holding pure, highly concentrated plant steroids. If we stop here, you have an incredibly powerful rooting agent. But in a survival garden, we do not leave things to chance. We have to defeat the second biggest enemy of cloning, pathogenic rot. When you stick an open, bleeding stem cutting into wet potting soil, you are introducing a wound to an environment filled with bacteria and fungal spores. Often the fungus will infect the open wound and rot the stem before the lentil hormones even have a chance to build the root. We need to build a shield. Willow trees are biologically famous for their resilience. This is because they produce massive quantities of a compound called salicylic acid. You know this chemical well. It is the active ingredient in aspirin. In plants, salicylic acid acts as an extreme immune system trigger. It forces the plant to build a chemical fortress against disease, blocking fungus and completely preventing stem rot. Go to any willow tree. Cut a handful of young, flexible green twigs. Chop those twigs into tiny 1-inch pieces. Put the chopped wood into a heat-safe glass jar. Pour boiling water over them until submerged and let it steep for 24 hours. Strain the wood chips out. You now have willow water. When you take your lentil extract and mix it equally with your willow water, you have created an indestructible cloning formula. The lentil forces the explosive root growth, and the willow builds an impenetrable fortress against disease. You now have your liquid gold, the lentil and willow serum. You are ready to take a cutting and clone your most expensive plant. But if you take that fresh cutting, dip it in your serum, and jam it into a pot full of premium, expensive garden center soil, you are going to kill it instantly. This is the #1 mistake beginners make, and it completely destroys their multiplication engine. Commercial potting soils are loaded with synthetic nitrogen fertilizers. Those fertilizers are designed for mature plants with tough, established root systems. When a freshly cut stem with raw, bleeding plant tissue touches that high nitrogen soil, the salt in the fertilizer physically burns the cells. It acts like acid. It cauterizes the wound, completely preventing the lentil hormones from triggering root growth. To clone mechanically and perfectly, you need a sterile, zero-burn environment. You need a soil mix that does absolutely nothing except hold moisture and provide oxygen. It must contain zero fertilizer. The cheap dirt recipe. Go to the hardware store and buy a brick of compressed cocoa coir, coconut fiber, and a bag of perlite, those white volcanic rocks. Both are incredibly cheap. Mix them exactly 50-50, half cocoa coir, half perlite. Add clean water until it is damp like a wrung-out sponge. That is it. The cocoa coir holds the exact right amount of water so the cutting doesn't dehydrate, and the perlite creates thousands of tiny microscopic air pockets. Roots need oxygen just as much as they need water. This mix provides zero nutrients to burn the stem, forcing the plant to rely entirely on your lentil serum to build its root system, safely. We have the serum, we have the soil, now we have to address the physics of the air. Remember what we discussed in Chapter 1. A cutting has leaves but no roots. Plants sweat moisture out of their leaves through a process called transpiration. Because the clone has no roots to drink replacement water from the soil, it will sweat itself to death in less than 4 hours if you leave it in the open air. The garden industry will try to sell you expensive, heated propagation trays with plastic vents to solve this. You do not need them. We are going to build a survival dome out of literal trash. Take a clean, clear plastic soda bottle or a large, clear plastic cup. After you dip your cutting into the lentil and willow serum, and after you press it into your zero-burn soil mix, you take that clear plastic bottle, cut the bottom off, and place it directly over the plant, pushing the edges down into the dirt. You have just created a localized 100% humidity micro-greenhouse. Because the dome is sealed, the moisture that the plant sweats out of its leaves hits the plastic, condenses, and drips right back down into the soil. The air becomes saturated. The plant physically cannot dehydrate. It sits in a state of suspended animation, perfectly protected, while the auxin from your lentils forces the roots to grow underground. Keep this dome out of direct sunlight. If the sun hits that plastic bottle, it turns into an oven and cooks the plant in minutes. Put it in a warm, shaded area. Within 7 to 10 days, the roots will establish. You will see new green growth on the top, and you can permanently remove the dome. Now that you have the exact mechanical systems to clone any plant with a 100% success rate, how do we use this to break the grocery store cycle? We build a perpetual harvest timeline. Most people buy 6 tomato plants, plant them all on the exact same day, and get completely overwhelmed when they all produce fruit at the exact same time in August. Then the plants die and they have no food for the rest of the year. We are going to use our cloning engine to stagger our food production mathematically. Day 1. You go to the nursery and buy one single high-quality, expensive heirloom tomato plant. You plant it in your garden. Day 2. That mother plant has grown and it is starting to produce suckers, those little extra branches that grow in the armpits of the main stems. You cut off 5 of those suckers. You dip them in your lentil and willow serum, put them in your zero-burn soil, and cover them with your $2 humidity domes. Day 3. Your 5 clones now have massive, aggressive root systems. You transplant them into the garden. Day 4, your original mother plant is producing its first red tomatoes. Meanwhile, your 5 clones are now large enough to produce their own suckers. You cut 5 suckers off the clones and repeat the process. Do you see the math? By simply extracting free auxin from your pantry, you have turned one $5 purchase into an unstoppable wave of food production.
When your original mother plant gets exhausted and stops producing in late summer, your clones are just hitting their prime. When those clones get tired, your third generation of clones is ready to fruit. You push your harvest all the way until the first winter freeze, pulling hundreds of pounds of food from a single initial investment. This is the fundamental difference between a hobbyist and a mechanical food producer. A hobby gardener sees a lentil as a bowl of soup. They see a willow branch as yard waste. They pay $30 for a plastic bottle of cloning gel, and they buy all new plants every single spring. A producer sees the underlying biological machinery of the world. A producer extracts master hormones from a 48-hour seed surge. A producer builds chemical armor from a tree. A producer uses mechanical efficiency to multiply their harvest infinitely. When you master this system, you step completely outside the fragile agricultural supply chain. You no longer care if seeds are sold out at the store. You no longer care if plant prices double next year due to inflation. Because as long as you have a handful of lentils, a plastic cup, and a pair of shears, you can literally print your own food. If you're ready to stop buying your survival and start building a real food engine, hit that subscribe button. We do not do pretty landscaping here. We provide the mechanical cheat codes. Go to your pantry right now, start soaking your lentils, and start multiplying your garden. I'm your favorite gardener. Keep your systems efficient, and I'll see you in the next one.